Hello everyone and welcome to another, I would say, reaction video. This time what I was thinking about discussing is the big elephant in many Agile rooms, which is usage of Gyra. How are teams using Gyra? Why are teams using Gyra for Agile? And why it's many people hate using Gyra for Agile, especially those who have a lot of experience with agility. And in order to do so, we'll read through one or more articles. We'll see how it goes, how long our conversation takes, and we'll just comment it. And of course, with me, as usual, is Adi. Welcome, Adi.
Hello.
So what do you think about Gyra, first of all?
I think that Gyra is an awful tool that serves a purpose in many organizations, for Agile especially. It's something that was thought of as being used for ticket management, and somehow they managed to get on this Agile wave and they became the almost default tool for anyone. I think business-wise, what they accomplished is amazing, but unfortunately, it's not that great.
All right, and I think we'll talk a bit about the reasons why Gyra is not that great from our point of view, but don't take this as a complete criticism of Gyra. I mean, Gyra by itself is a tool. Any tool can be used for good or not, right? It depends how you use it and what you use it for. I think it's fairly, as a tool, it works, right? This is one of the important things. It actually works. It has a lot of features. It's quite adaptable. You can add extensions, you can write in a special query language things to extend it and things like that, right? So it is useful. It can be used in a way that makes sense, but what my criticism generally is that it's a very complicated tool for what we need actually in Agile.
And I think the biggest issue is visualizing things. Mm-hmm. Of course, there are plenty of add-ons and plenty of things you can buy or you need to buy on top of the typical stuff. And some of them are pretty good. But still, you do have the need to visualize things. And it's tough with Gyra. It's really tough to visualize what you need to do and use the tool in a very more natural way and easier way.
Right. Yeah, and I think, well, we'll go through these articles and see, but one of the challenges that I face is that it's quite hard to change your process when you have Gyra. If you get really into the depth of the process and you define your processes there and everything is set in a way, and agility is about adapting to what comes to you and what you learn, and you should be changing your process. Every sprint is not, if not more often than that.
That's why typically with Gyra I tend to do as little as possible with the process there. Leave it, so no constraints, nothing. No, just leave it be. No, nothing. Just let it be usable. And then we put constraints as team agreements. So not something that we enforce, but something that we enforce in a team by collaborating more.
Okay, so let's go through this article. This is actually an older article written by Andy Kelk. I actually don't know who the author is. I just searched for articles related to Gyra, and this is what I found, and I think it's pretty good. He describes himself as a digital technology leader with 20 years experience in the Asia, Pacific, Australia, and the UK. So it's, he seems to have done a lot of things, but I don't know him as such. And so the article started saying, I've recently retweeted a few tweets which weren't exactly complimentary about JIRA, for example. And you may notice that these tweets are from 2015. This may sound old, but I think many of the criticism is still valid, actually.
Yeah, nothing changed, I think, since then.
Harry Karhatsu, plenty of good things happened at work today, and then I heard we start using JIRA. Neil Killick, who's actually, I don't remember exactly, I think I'm following him on Twitter. He's either from Agile, but I think he's rather from the Lean movement. And very glad prominent Agile Kanban folk are publicly speaking out against JIRA as a tool for agility. It ain't. No one's listening though. So this has been quite a frustration for many agilists, that we focus so much on the tool. And the first thing you hear when we hear companies, we want to switch to Agile. Okay, cool. So let's do some, organized teams, self-organizing teams. Let's give them autonomy and so on. But what they really say first is, okay, but we'll use JIRA. This is our decision. This is the first decision that we make. And that's a bit, this is why it's frustrating to many people. Today, a coworker asked me why I was so down on JIRA, which is a fair question, especially since we use the entire Atlassian suite of products, including JIRA. So why does JIRA set my teeth on edge? The biggest reason is that there somehow became a conflation between using JIRA and doing Agile. That is, many organizations seem to think that gaining agility is a matter of installing a tool. Mm-hmm. Of course, individuals and interactions over processes and tools would have you think again. But maybe hoping that people have read the Agile Manifesto is a little optimistic. Even people who have read sometimes, we've been surprised, I think, many times that people read the Agile Manifesto sometimes, but they don't read the principles behind the Agile Manifesto.
Yeah, and it's simple anyway.
Yeah, it's easy. Nothing to analyze. Yeah, so this is actually what was the annoying part. There's somehow become a conflation between using JIRA and doing Agile. And you may think that now we are now in 2022 and this has changed. No, it hasn't.
I think the only thing that changed is that you have more add-ons.
Yeah, and probably they work a bit faster. So yeah. I was actually surprised a few weeks ago that a pal reached out and asked me for, we have these problems in our teams. We are a startup, and how do we fix these problems? And the problems were mostly related with how to use JIRA for their process, for their Agile process. Which was, so, you are a startup. You don't even know whether you have a product market fit, right? Because that's the first thing that you need to achieve as a startup. Figure out if you have a product market fit. And in order to do so, you need to run a lot of experiments, ideally. And your problem is that you cannot use JIRA as you... that's
it sounds weird, because I think mostly you should care about understanding what you need, and typically in these situations I think a very big wall with some paper or post-its or some markers, and that's enough. That's everything you need. Just a very big wall.
Yeah. And oftentimes not even that, because once again, it's one thing to build an application where you kind of know the scope, you have market research, you have a lot of things. But when you try to build something for a startup, you don't have a user base, you don't know who you are addressing to, you're trying to find that market fit, and all you have is a bunch of hypotheses that you need to test as fast as possible. And so in order to do that, you probably don't need that big of a wall, because your time frame is actually quite small.
Yes, exactly. You don't need, that's true. You need a big wall just to be nice, you know, to have everything there.
To have a nice
but
design.
don't take everything out of there. Probably, you know, what happens during this type of brainstorming sessions, you see how much you could do, but then you need to pick just what you can do or what you should do from all that you discussed. So it's always like that.
That's true. Okay, so the next tweet, I kind of like this. Klaus Leopold. It hurts a little bit to follow the Kanban discussion from the neighbor table. You only need to turn on Kanban in Gyra. That's it.
Turn on the Kanban button. That's all. And now it works.
Installing Kanban in your organization. Yeah, so, you know, it's funny because I've recently had a chat with somebody, one of our friends who had an issue inside the company with managers who don't understand theory of constraints. And so basically they realized that the development works too slow, and they started to hire more developers, because that's what you do. If you focus on these things, you know, Kanban is much more subtle than just having a board in Gyra. There's much more there.
In fact, you should visualize what happens. And again, going back to the difficulty of visualizing, a Kanban board in Gyra doesn't help you with almost anything what Kanban needs to bring.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, I don't know, a very unfriendly visualization place. That's all.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, if you have 3, 4, 5 things there, it helps. But then why use Gyra if you have 3, 4, 5 things? You could use, I don't know, a piece of paper, an A4 paper, if you have that many, and it's better, and it's enough. So that's why it's really awful.
Yeah. Since Atlassian renamed the Greenhopper plugin to Gyra Agile, the situation has only got worse. What you now see is still a project that is composed of issues, but they're magically displayed in swim lanes. So now we are Agile, right? The thing is that Gyra started life as a bug issue management tool, and if your primary unit of work is an issue, you're not starting from a great place. As an aside, every time I hear a team talk about their user stories or features as Gyras, a little piece of me dies inside. I've actually never heard that, but...
I do hear that.
Yeah? Cool. Yeah. Okay. But I've been in meetings where... So we were in the daily stand-up, which... What actually... the daily stand-up should be is a coffee break with your colleagues. That's it. A coffee break where you talk about your challenges for the day and what you plan to do and things like that. That's all it is. And the way it was working is, okay, I'm working on ticket 1235-7 and... I worked on it yesterday, I'll be working on it today, and I have no impediments. Thank you, next. And people kept talking like that.
Small robots giving a status to the boss.
Oh boy. So you are not collaborating if you are talking like that. Now, I understand actually why many programmers, particularly introvert, prefer to use such a system, right? Because it's nice. You sit in your corner, You get a ticket assigned, you write the code, fix the task, whatever you need to do, move the ticket in Gyra, get the next ticket, work on it, and so on. So you don't need any communication, you don't need to talk to anybody, you don't need to collaborate with anybody. Why would you need any of these things? You just get the ticket, you write the code, and move on. And you do one or half of one or 3 or 5 or 10 in a day, and then you go home, and that's it. It's a perfectly nice working environment, right?
Yeah, it's a very good ticketing system. We need to agree on that.
But when you need to actually work together, that's where it's not as brilliant.
Yes, so it's a very good ticketing system and a very bad collaboration system.
Yeah. You can see the impact this has had on organizations by looking at what skills they're seeking in the job ads. Oh, don't get me started on that. Project managers with MS project skills have been replaced with Scrum Masters with JIRA skills.
Yeah, funny thing, at the customer side, we received, so they want to hire a new supplier for a new system, and they received CVs from the team that supplier has, and all the team members had Gyra put there as a tool, as a skill, and it was like very awkward for me to see someone who said 25 years experience, software architect. What do I know to do? How to use Gyra, how to put a ticket, how to add a defect. So it was really explained that I know that's what I need to know. I know how to do in Gyra, to add the defect, to add the ticket, and to and something else. I don't know. So that was really awkward. I mean, I guess if you have 25 years of experience as an architect, you shouldn't mention that in your CV. It's really weird.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same as mentioning, I've been doing software for 20 years or so, and I know how to type in a Word document.
Yeah.
Or I know how to draw diagrams in whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, these are skills that we expect, so that's the big problem. Using Gyra is just a very small detail, right, in agility. But I think anybody who is smart can pick up using Gyra fairly quickly. Okay, writing a ticket, then maybe a skill in itself that needs a bit of training.
Yeah, but after 25 years, probably you know how to write a ticket, especially as an architect who writes something a lot more important. Yeah. Maybe documents or...
and by ticket, just to clarify, by ticket I mean a bug report or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
That indeed is a skill in itself because you need to add certain details and so on. Okay, fine. But that probably takes you, 2-3 months of doing it to learn how to do it properly. It's not that I expect you to already know it. So, yeah. But, I'm so annoyed when I see, and we actually, I have to say, we make fun sometimes at LinkedIn job titles because some of them are just crazy. Like Senior Agile Project Manager, Gyra Specialist.
Of course, you need to know Gyra. So it's like, I don't know, any other tool. Like you need to know, Visual Studio when you write C#. You need to know IntelliJ when you write Java, and you need to know Gyra when you are a project manager, right? Or a Scrum Master, because it's almost the same, right?
Yeah, Gyra is Agile, obviously.
Yes.
Okay, so let's move on because we will also try to offer some positive advice, right?
Maybe.
Well, yes, we will. Where's that red flag so-called agile vacancies? Own, run, certified, project, ensure, manage, JIRA, typo, spellings, etc. Flowchain Sensei, Bob Marshall. Yeah. So I don't always agree with Bob Marshall, but in this case, I think he's absolutely right. The second way that Gyra promotes best practices in its workflows. I'll admit that it's over 5 years since I had to administer a Gyra workflow, but it was hellish then, and I suspect it's not got much better since. Because there's such complexity, there's a big ramp-up time and a large learning curve. Therefore, teams are not incentivized to change their process. Yeah. Changing your process would be one of the key outcomes of an inspect and adapt cycle and the core fundamental of continuous improvement. And the next, before we comment on this, there's a comment by David J. Anderson. Well, a tweet that matches this. For those of you who don't know, David Anderson is one of the prominent people in Lean, Kanban, Lean software development. Let's be clear, people, you can do Kanban with Gyra. If you want real results and improvement, get a tool designed for evolutionary change.
Yep.
So to me, that's the biggest challenge I've seen. If you are using a Kanban system, it's not only the fact that you are building a board. You need to visualize what's happening on the board. You need to have WIP limits. You need to have entry criteria for every column, which, as far as I remember, are still not implemented in Gyra. So
no, they're not.
No, so you cannot have entry criteria, not even as a note on the column, which is the basic thing that you should have as part of any Kanban process, because that's what leads to quality in your process. But even if you have this, let's say you'd have all that, then the result is that occasionally you analyze your process, and actually quite often, it can happen daily in Kanban. And you realize, oh, we need to change something. We need to add a new column. We need to remove a column. We need to add a new swim lane. We need to change some of our entry criteria. We need to... What else can you do? Change the WIP limits. Right?
Yeah, I think changing WIP limits is the only thing that is easy to do. All the rest is very difficult or extremely difficult, and some things are quite impossible when you need to have, for example, a swim lane, but not all the columns pass through that swim lane.
Exactly, yeah.
You cannot do that because you need to have like a matrix, and that's how it works.
Yeah, and that's fundamental about Kanban. Kanban is about complex boards typically, because you start with a complex process, which hopefully you simplify and optimize in time. But when you first start, it tends to be quite complex because the same team is managing bugs and requests of different time frames. So for example, you need to have some things that are expedite and that you need to do very quickly. You have bugs for which you have an SLA. You have feature development for which you can have longer times. And these are only three. There can be much more such things, and it's never easy to do that. Not only that, we have another problem, which is one of the powerful things of a visual tool, digital tool, would be to allow a zoom in and zoom out, right? So imagine you are a manager of an organization. You should be able to look into a Kanban board that fits your level and where you see the different initiatives or projects or products or whatever you have, features that you are interested in, and where they are in the process. And if you zoom into those things, you can go all the way to the team level and see, what kinds of tasks are related to that and so on. And you can't even do that easily in Gyra. So that's...
Yeah, exactly. In fact, there aren't many digital tools that can do that easily. And it's not an easy tool to make. That's the truth. It's something very difficult. I don't know, given the initial Gyra system, how you could adapt it to such an ecosystem, such requirements. I think it's really difficult.
Yeah. And so I imagine you can use it, but you need to have, and it's a perfectly valid pattern to have disconnected boards. Like have a board at the management level, have a board at the, lower level, because you can have strategic, yes. You can have a kind of initiative, and you can have kind of development levels. And update those at different points in time by different people who are involved, product owners or whoever is getting involved there. But you can also do that without Gyra, so you don't need it.
Yes.
Okay, so now we go into more, let's say, positive territory. The final reason I advise people to steer clear of Gyra, because physical boards are awesome. A physical card wall is a totem for the team. It's an information radiator that anyone who's passing by can look at and engage in a conversation around. Gyra, meanwhile, hides that away behind the login screen. It actively discourages you from looking at work in progress. Overheard, Gyra is not just an information refrigerator, it's an information crisper, cold, out of sight, and only noticed when turned rotten.
That's harsh.
Yeah. It is a bit harsh also, although I have to remember that our late friend David Hassman used to say that Gyra is the place where ideas go to die.
Yes, and he's absolutely right. So here I think if you have that approach where you add everything there, everything in your mind, that's what happens. But if you use it as you should, and even delete things that are older because they're not that important, things that you never touched, and probably it becomes better. So I think you need maybe a kind of attitude to clean up regularly.
Yeah. And actually this leads me to another thing that many times when I talk to teams about physical boards, they tell me, oh, but we have so many things in backlog, they can't possibly fit on the wall.
Yes, we have too many.
And I'm like, that's a feature, not a bug. That's a feature of the physical board. The space is limited. You can only put as much.
And you can only work as much. So that's the reason.
Yeah, because you can only work as much, of course. Yeah, precisely. And so, okay, this was written before the pandemic and before needing to do a lot of remote work. But let's not forget that since then we also have tools that are amazing for collaboration. One of them being Miro.com, where you can have post-its and you can zoom in and out, and you can have it has an application for Kanban board, which I'm not very, it has many limitations. I'm not that happy with it. But you can basically build your own Kanban board because you can draw lines and you can add post-its and you can fundamentally use it in the same way as you would use a physical board. Only you can use it by being at a distance because of various reasons like the pandemic. And that, at least, that is much, much nicer in terms of collaboration, visualization, things like that.
Yeah, and so if you compare the two, these two tools that we're talking now, you can see that Gyra is somewhere in the 90s as how it looks and feels, as the UI and user experience, and you can see that Miro is somewhere in 2020 or something.
Yeah.
So there's a very big difference also in this way of how you feel the system. Gyra didn't change at all from this point of view.
Yeah, because it was, it's the curse of success. They were so successful that they kept improving the tool, but they didn't need to do a radical change. Right?
Yeah.
So let's read a bit more because this is quite interesting. Nothing creates a sense of connection with your work quite like a physical card will. There's a real sense of meaningful progress when you move cards around on a wall that you just don't get by dragging them on with a mouse. And there's plenty of research to show that progress, no matter how small, is motivating for individuals and teams. I like the feeling when moving a piece of paper in the whiteboard and creating space for the next one. Does JIRA give you that feeling? Henry Karhatsu, another tweet. Yeah. This is another thing that's, I think, many programmers, because we kind of live in the digital world, we don't expect it to be so impactful. But actually touching the card, moving it, interacting with it, it's psychologically it's a completely different experience than going in Gyra and saying, okay, done.
Yeah.
And let's not forget another thing that is not mentioned here. How I think you've been with some clients that are using Gyra, and
of course.
How was their stand-up?
It's varied, so it can be really good because they know what they need to do and how to collaborate, but it can be really bad, and they talk like exactly as you said, not really like that robotic, like everyone saying the thing, but they're not talking sometimes even in the name of what they're doing. So I don't know, that development, the new feature I'm doing, they're just talking in codes. So the ticket code, right? The issue code. So that's a sign that probably you don't even know what you're working on. In a way, it's just a ticket. You don't understand the business need and business impact, really. So yeah, it can be varied. I mean, I saw very good stand-ups with Gyra as well.
Who is updating? Who is updating Gyra usually?
In very bad situations, someone for a product owner or Scrum Master or project manager or something. But in the last years, I saw that more the team is doing that. So they are working actively on this. I think you can work on a system where they work on stories and everybody works on that story. So it does create a collaboration like a small team that works on that story, and they do collaborate, and they use the tool to exchange useful information about what's going on.
Yeah. Because that's one of the things that I've seen. I've also seen, so somebody needs to update Gyra. That's one of the things. With physical boards, you can easily go to the board, move the card, and so on. With Gyra, it tends to be that everybody looks at one screen and one person updates and moves the tickets around. And this loses a bit from interaction and from your connection with what you're doing and why you're doing it. That's my general feeling. Sorry. But one thing you can do is to actually switch. So move the keyboard around, or move the mouse around, or move around the chair.
Yes.
And
Yes, exactly. So I do see that situation. I think it's more common today than it was maybe 5 years ago. And I guess it depends a lot on the organization and how well they work together. Gyra is not really, it's neither an issue and it doesn't help either. So it's just there to hold the information. But I think if you have people who can collaborate, they will collaborate. So that's basically it.
But that's actually what I've often felt, is that you can very well do the same that you do with Gyra without Gyra.
Yes, of course you can. I mean, there's a place to hold that information. That's the thing, and you need a tool to communicate. And as I say, I think you should treat these things like a work in progress, a sketch that you're creating, but you should never have something like the specifications, or I don't know, executable specifications or anything like that in Gyra.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, people treat it like that, but then in a product, in a long-lived product, you will have so many changes that you don't even know what to search for anymore.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a bad usage. It's not necessarily Gyra's fault. I think with any tool like that, it could happen. It's more the fault of not using it properly and not understanding that it's a transient tool. So it's a tool where you have information that you need at a certain moment when you develop things, and after that the information starts decaying as maybe you add or you remove features on that area, or you change the system, the product. So if you need to look at, I don't know, 10 stories back on what happened, it would be extremely difficult. So that's why you need to use something else. That's why you need, I think, to use PDD or specification by example, or any types of executable specification. I think that's the way to go.
Yeah, and I actually find this interesting because I've recently reread the Business Analysis Book of Knowledge, the recent version, and this is the reference for business analysis. And first of all, it's not only for the role of business analyst, because it's for the actual activities of business analysis.
It's a skill, it's not a role. That's exactly what people should get.
And you need to have it anyway. I mean, if you are a small team that doesn't have the role of business analyst, somebody is doing business analysis anyway.
Of course.
But one of the interesting things that I found there is that there's actually a whole section about information architecture, and how you structure documentation about a product. And that you need to have rules and you need to make sure that it's up to date. And this is one of the responsibilities in business analysis, that you have the documentation. Now, traditionally, this used to be in the specification document. You would write the specification document, and then if something needed to change in the project, in the feature, you would get the change request, and then you would update the specification document, and that would contain the whole information about the product, ideally, because usually it didn't, right? It was left behind some iterations. But in Agile, it's a bit different. In Agile, what you do is you treat the specifications as transient because you're learning while building them. But at the end, you need to have some documentation that you can search. So basically what you're talking about.
Yes, exactly. So you need to know what your product is able to do now.
Yeah.
And maybe how it does it now. Not more, not less. You need to have the current snapshot of your system.
Yeah.
And I mean, you can do that in the old way, maybe not with so many details, or you can do that with executable specification. I think either one is good. One, the older way maybe needs more maintenance, more manual maintenance. But if you do have the rigor to continue adding and removing and improving that, I think that works really well. And I see organizations work like that very, very good.
Yeah, and absolutely. So, and both are kind of useful because, I mean, text is easy to update. Maybe you don't have the skills to update executable specifications, or maybe you need more training in that, and so on. Diagrams are very useful, and executable diagrams, unfortunately, are still not a thing, although we should have them.
Yeah.
Diagrams as tests. But so what this brings us to is something interesting, that you don't really need the history of a specific user story. But what you actually need is to see the history of the board for your retrospectives. Right? So that's one interesting thing to look at, because it can show you bottlenecks, it can show you impediments, it can show you, things that went not that well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think now going to retrospectives and looking at JIRA, again, it's kind of tough to use it for retrospectives. It doesn't show, I mean, you need to build dashboards that will aggregate information from what happened, and then look at the dashboards and understand what's going on. It's cumbersome. It's not impossible. It may be difficult, but it's not easy. So that's why I think, in a way, it prevents you from having retrospectives with more data, more real information. And if you don't have that real information, you're guessing, and probably you're not taking the good measures to improve your way of working.
Yeah, and I was surprised to see that actually measuring things like lead time and cycle time, it's not that easy in Gyro.
No, you need to write some code.
And cumulative flow diagram, which is theoretically built-in diagram in Gyro, but it's not that well done.
Yes. Again, add-ons or write some code. Anyway, it's a kind of an add-on if you do it yourself, but yeah, it's complicated.
So on one hand, it's good that you have all this freedom of adding things, but on the other hand, why so much complexity?
Yeah.
And this is actually the conclusion, Andy Kelk's conclusion in this article. So why would you use Gyra instead of a physical board? If you want a backup of the wall what happens if someone defaces the card or the building burns down, then take a photo every day.
Exactly.
I would argue that most of the times you can reconstruct that board from memory very easily, from the collective memory of everyone working.
Yeah, I think so. It's work, of course, but I don't think a fire happens daily. So again, it's something that happens.
Yeah.
And maybe you have bigger problems if there's a fire in your office.
Yeah. If you want interaction in a split-side team, have 2 card walls that are kept in sync by a team member on each end of the divide. So this is about remote work, right? You're working remotely. And by the way, if I were working remotely in an agile team today, I would probably have a board on my wall, a physical board on my wall that I update.
Yeah, so a way to do this is to have a webcam, good quality webcam on the wall where this board is, and everybody can see it live, how it is. You can do that easily. Again, you need a good quality, but that's it. And you have a video stream, and that's it. You can ask someone who's there in the office to change your post-it and put it somewhere, or you do that in the daily, or I don't know. So there are many options here to solve the situation. You can duplicate the board on your wall, and if you want it closer and to feel it and to touch it, you can do that as well. If it's too big, you have an issue or more issues. And even some people use, as I said, like a piece of paper to have the board always on them. So you have something like this, and that should be your board, like this paper.
Yeah, and then you can also fold it like an origami that you carry with you.
You put it in your bag, and that's all. So there are many ways of working like that.
Going back to if it's big, I remember Mary Popandik, who is another specialist, let's say, in the Lean Kanban approach to software development. And she said that if you have a large backlog, just throw away 80% of it because you'll never do it.
Yeah. Of course, what happens is when you have a big product with a big team, you need to have, as you said, a zoom in, zoom out.
Yeah.
And then you need to have more boards because you need to look at initiatives or epics for one view and with objectives and so on. And then you go deeper into what you're working on daily.
Yeah,
that's true.
Okay. If you want charts, draw them by hand. A big visible chart in the team area is much more valuable than a tiny one hidden on a dashboard. So I actually have some tips here. You know that you can, one thing that people tell me is we need to have the burn down chart, right? So how do we do the burn down chart if we have a physical board? You know how difficult it is to update a burn down chart daily on a piece of paper? You just draw a line every day.
Yeah, it takes a second or so.
That's it.
Mm-hmm.
So and what happens with a burn down chart that's buried in Gyra? Do you ever look at it?
Yeah, probably not. Only, when in some situations I really succeeded to have TVs in the working space, and I had a dashboard which included also the burn down chart or other charts and so on. So in that situation, I think people were looking at it because, well, we were putting the TVs strategically so they are seen. But otherwise, I don't think most people look at it.
Yeah, so that's the thing. You need to have information radiator it doesn't radiate if it's hidden in a tool somewhere. It needs to radiate. So you need to have it either on a wall, on a large TV, on a projector, on a something, and see it all day.
And adding, another comment that I heard about drawing your drafts on paper is what's my problem as well, is I don't really know how to draw straight lines or perpendicular lines or things like that. So what I was doing is I was having some templates, printed them, and then just draw the lines easily. It's easier when you have like a mesh or something like that, and you're able to draw things. So I have a template of a burn down, and have a template of a, I don't know, whatever, cumulative flow diagram or so, and then just put on your numbers and draw some lines, and that's it. It's very easy.
Yeah. Okay. And the final phrase from this article. I know some teams love JIRA. I worked with one who were devastated that it had been taken away from them in favor of a much larger, more bloated Agile lifecycle management tool. Oh yeah, I mean, if you replace JIRA with an even more complicated tool, then keep JIRA.
Yeah, we're gonna miss it.
But I know just as many teams who'd much rather not use JIRA or any electronic tool at all. All I'm asking is that you see the world beyond JIRA, try not using any tool, try using a lighter weight tool, and then go back to JIRA if you really think you're missing out on something. So the general gist of it, I think, is sometimes you need to use JIRA, or you need to use a digital tool because management requires you to, because things like that. And even in those situations, what we've done is we built a physical board. We were using the physical board, and at the end of this daily stand-up or daily scrum, we were updating the digital tool, right? So after we had our chat and so on, everybody goes to the desk, takes 5 minutes to update the tool, and that's it. And that's enough to keep the management happy that they have, visibility or...
Yeah, and give them dashboards. I think that's important. So if you are using Gyra, then you're not using some sorts of boards or dashboards, you're not giving any visibility. So I think that's the minimal thing you need to do.
Yeah. Okay, so let's see. I had a few more articles. But I think that there are a couple more from TechCrunch. One is called Death to Gyra, and another one, Gyra is an anti-pattern. But I think I would find more interesting about, there's a quick, just to go through a list, 7 reasons why people say they hate Gyra. And once again, this is an older article. I don't remember exactly. It was published on divinity.com. You will have the link in the description anyway. And it's funny that the first reason is Gyra is not designed for project management. What we discussed, that it started as a ticketing system, and then it was kind of adapted to project management in general and to Agile in particular.
Yeah.
There's probably another problem when we talk about Agile, that it's kind of a second-class citizen in the whole thing, and it doesn't quite match.
Yeah.
And there is one funny thing, we've also heard voices elsewhere saying that the equation of Gyra tickets to the work actually done leads to no Gyra, no work approach, which is a common excuse for some folks to refuse helping their teammates.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have nothing to do there. Nobody allocated the Gyra ticket to me.
Exactly. So I have no reason to help people. And of course, in an agile environment, not cool, man.
But that's a thing that kind of a behavior that gets, in a way, suggested. It's not something that necessarily is enforced, but it's suggested by the tool, because sometimes environment creates habits, and this is, I think, one situation where your habit is that if you nobody allocated something to you, you don't have anything to work. And Gyra, in a way, promotes that without knowing it, but it's a ticketing tool. So I think that's what you do in a ticketing tool. While with Agile, you want more to have a pull system where the team asks or takes work from the whole work that you need to do, and then they will self-organize. So it's kind of difficult to get out of this paradigm of giving work, so push system, towards a pull system where you are getting your own work from a queue or from whatever system.
Yeah, and actually that's a very good point. I think you touched on something that's quite deep in these tools, which is, they don't encourage tool systems.
Yeah, and because of that, you always need to have management. You always need to have some sort of coordination, and less self-organized, self-managed groups.
Yeah, that's actually quite interesting. And I think, in a way, this is a habit, right? And this is built in time, typically by a scrum master or a coach. And but you have much more interaction with a physical board where you can actually say, okay, so what do you want to do next, right? That's a good question to ask.
With a physical board, no one will, when you move something from somewhere to there, you won't receive an email notification, hey, you received this new ticket, you need to solve it. It will be there and you need to discuss about it. So it's not that important who moves it. It's just important that you need to have the conversation and you need to work on it. So there's no connection with the tool. In fact, there's no automation or anything.
And actually, you touched on another thing that's quite interesting, because receiving emails can be very annoying. Yes. Particularly this kind of emails, right? You've assigned yourself to the ticket. Wow, I didn't know that. I needed a notification from the tool to tell me that I assigned myself to a ticket.
Well, excellent. In fact, to be frank, Gyra doesn't do that. They were smart enough to remove notifications for you when you changed it. But other tools, used to do that.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure you can turn off these notifications. But there's a problem with the system in the sense that if somebody can assign you a ticket, they probably will, and then you don't have the option of opting out from notifications because somebody might.
Yes. And a notification is not a conversation. So we go back to that way of collaborating. So if you were notified that, hey, you need to start doing that, will you start asking your team, hey, let's talk about this. Let's understand what we need to do. I guess not. You'll either try to do something and it may work or not, or you'll wait until someone, the same person who assigned it to you, will organize a meeting where you need to discuss about things. So again, you see how this need of coordination starts being very important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean that's quite interesting. I think it's a very mechanical way of doing things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very reactive way of doing things instead of being adaptive, instead of being kind of proactive and figuring out what you need to do next, depending on how things have changed in the last day or 2 days or so, right?
Mm-hmm.
Gyra doesn't fit into agile software development. The first principle of the Agile Manifesto is probably the most radically understood one. From one side, Agile purists claim on its basis that Gyra is a step back in terms of Agile as it disconnects people and makes things overcomplicated. Yes. From the other one, there are managers trying to implement tools without setting up a workflow first, being afraid that it would turn out too rigid or not so agile anymore. Well, yes. I mean, you don't actually need a complicated workflow in an agile environment. You may start from a complicated workflow, but your goal should be to simplify it as much as possible.
Right. Yeah, that's what I said somewhere in the beginning. My choice is to create a workflow where anybody can do anything.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah.
And then, okay, we'll see how it goes. If people will do mistakes, then we'll decide together as team agreements what we shouldn't do. But I wouldn't enforce that through workflow, but just, in our team and discuss it. And that's all.
Yeah, and this is the part where I don't actually agree with it. The bad news is that we should turn back once again and take a look at the way we work, forgetting for a moment about the technology we use to help ourselves. So it starts good, but then it doesn't quite understand Agile. An Agile process, first, this is a problem.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing important in an Agile process is inspect and adapt.
Mm-hmm.
That's the whole Agile process for you. Inspect and adapt. Right. An Agile process basically starts with a whiteboard and a pack of post-its, so any software tool can come and help only once the team establishes the workflow, knows it well, and has it tested. No. Your workflows should change. So there's a saying about Kanban and also about Scrum that says if you are doing Kanban now the same way you've done it 6 months ago, you're not doing Kanban.
Mm-hmm.
Same about Scrum. If you're doing Scrum now the same way you've done it 6 months ago, you're not doing Scrum. The goal of these things is not to find a process and then that becomes the process that you just keep it. The goal is to have inspect and adapt. So always look at what you're doing and adapt everything to it.
Exactly. I think that's an issue not with Gyra, but with a different paradigm than what we want to have with this, let's say, more lightweight way of working as with Agile, with Scrum, Kanban, and XP, and so on. The focus is not on process, because that's an issue you often see, that people start from, hey, okay, we have a team, we have some requirements, we need to start with the process. I don't think so. I think we need to start with the goals, with what we want to deliver, what value we're creating, and start working. And then we'll start having some sorts of retrospectives, inspect and adapt. and we'll see how we go from there. I think that's the issue with big design up front, with let's discover the process on our way.
Yeah. And I like, so even when you look at how, many people criticize Scrum because they say it's not agile. It has so many things that you need to do, and there are not so many, but anyway. And I'm not, let's say, the biggest fan of Scrum. It's not my first choice of process. If I were to build a team of product that does product development, that wouldn't be my first choice. But we also need to recognize that the way Jeff describes it is, it's a way of bootstrapping your way of work.
Mm-hmm.
So bootstrapping means fundamentally that you start with something. You start with this framework, and then you figure out what works for you and what doesn't work for you, and then you keep adapting it to your needs. So it's not about keeping all those things from the Scrum guide.
Mm-hmm.
Not even. You can actually drop some of those things in time.
Mm-hmm.
You start with those because they are a good way to boost a team, basically, and to allow it to go into a good direction, right? So that's what it's really about. So if you end up with the process,
Mm-hmm.
you probably are not doing Agile. And Gyra is your last issue. I mean, in that case, you can use Gyra.
Of course, it will be very useful and helpful.
It will be useful because it keeps the process. But
yes. So if you don't need to update anything, change anything, it's going to be very useful. But
you won't have agility.
You won't have agility. I'm not saying that. Maybe even that can be a lot better than how many places they work. So that could be a huge improvement from a chaotic way of working or a very traditional, low-paced project management approach to something like that with a fixed process, lightweight fixed process. It's a huge step forward. But maybe after that, you can move forward to something else.
Okay, so let's quickly go through the final ones. Gyra is too complex to be used effectively. I think we touched on that. Yes. It is. Gyra is lacking features. We touched on that. Yes, it is.
Yeah, they have add-ons, so
yeah,
you need to buy some more.
Yeah, or you need to build some more. Gyra's UX UI are clumsy and inconsistent.
Yes.
I mean, I don't know how to characterize its UI and UX, but I definitely know that I don't like it. It feels like the 90s, as you were saying.
Yes. It works, but it's clumsy, exactly.
Gyra is slow.
It can be. I mean, I saw also instances where it works really well. I think you need to put a lot of power.
Yeah.
A lot of... so if you put it on a machine and hope it will work out, no. So probably you need to put very strong machines, especially when you have a lot of people working on it.
Yeah. So I'm not sure about this one. I think your experience may vary.
Yes. So it depends on how you administrate, how you update it, how are your machines, and so on. And it can work well from that point of view.
But I have noticed that it requires some effort in administration. And I don't mean only on creating workflows and things like this, but the actual server administration, making sure that it works correctly.
But that's why they created, well, not recently, but for a number of years, they created a cloud one where it's more like a service. So of course, it's not very effective from a budgeting point of view if you don't have a lot of users, something like more than 3,000 or 5,000. I don't know. It will be more expensive, but with the cloud one, you also reduce somehow this type of work.
Yeah. And the 7, Atlassian is not as helpful as the customers expect. I have no experience with that. I don't know. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. I have no idea. To sum it up, we can see lots of ambiguity among people treating Atlassian product. What's considered as flexible by one part is rigid for the other. Some don't feel like paying for additional features. Others totally love the idea of customizing the solution. Business and non-technical folks want to keep everything simple and intuitive, while the angry nerds like sifting through the endless docs and coming up with workarounds. Basically, there are as many opinions as many heads, but both sides can learn a couple of constructive lessons from them. Well, yeah.
Yeah. A thing I saw is that people who... there are a lot of people who have only used Gyra. That's very interesting as a tool for things like that. And my recommendation is, hey, try something else, Try other tools. There's plenty of tools and see how they work for you. And quite often it's a surprise to them that there are tools that work a lot better and nicer than Jira. And most of them will see how bad it is only after they have the comparison, but they never had the choice, because typically these tools are company corporate tools, and nobody would install 5 of these tools in parallel to show you which one is better.
Yeah.
So that's the reason why probably people don't complain as much about it.
Yeah, and I think it's a problem when it's the default choice, right? Because it's not the only choice.
Yes.
All right, so we talked a bit about Gyra. What are some conclusions?
I think it's the necessary evil that can be used if you don't have other choice. If you only work remote, yeah, okay. But I do suggest to treat it as simple as possible. Don't go crazy implementing everything, automating everything. It will make it a lot worse and worse, more difficult to use. If you work in the same office, so as a team that works in the same office, even if you have Gyra, I think it's a very good practice to have a visual board in parallel as a way of visualizing what you need to do and work on that. Use that for your dailies, for your retrospectives, for your plannings, for your demos, for your reviews, for whatever you want to do, for your whip, for your swim lanes, expedites, and so on. And it's not really double the work. What it might seem, it's a lot simpler, and it can be even enjoyable if you understand the value, if you start feeling the value that it brings.
Yeah, so I agree. It's as I said, to me, the biggest issues with it is I kind of find it clunky and I don't know, a bit ugly. It doesn't bring me joy in a way to interact with it whenever we need to. So I understand why some companies need to have this traceability and have some reporting built in and have the managers with dashboards, and in some cases they are even very useful. So you can actually use those to mine useful data about your process and to figure out where you have bottlenecks and how to change and so on. With this being said, at the team level, I still use a much nicer tool for interactions and for collaboration in the team, and update Gyra only if really necessary and only when really necessary. And if this means 5 minutes daily, everybody updates their Gyra, fine, we can live with that. And the rest of the time we actually use the nicer things that we have. Yeah.
Yep.
So this is it from us this time. We touched on the elephant in the room, in the Agile room, because Gyra is so big in Agile, right? And I'm curious what you think. What is your experience with using Gyra? Have you ever tried another tool? Was anything surprising to you from this conversation? Did you equate Gyra with agility before we started talking about this? We are not completely against digital tools. Of course, they are very useful. What we like is to have tools that encourage collaboration. That's the main thing. And my general feeling is that there are better tools for that. So let us know what you think. Let us know if there are any other things that you'd like us to react to. Weird situations that you see in your organization. We'll keep you anonymous. We won't say who you are and what you've been talking about. And yeah, let us know if you have other questions or other interesting things that you'd like us to talk about. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, remember to think, design, and work smart.